As an introvert, public speaking is not something I get out of bed every day to do, nor is podcasting, but I do see the value in it. And I do love a good story. If you know me well, you know I like to have good, deep conversations with people, and I always laugh and say, I haven't had a good conversation with someone until they've told me about their last rash. So we're going to talk today about some good stuff, some deep stuff, and I'm excited for the conversations. Hopefully it will come after this. So I don't view myself as an overly entertaining person. My life is not one that's, overly inspiring, I would say. But I'll walk through a little bit about my background, but really what I'd love to do today is to get you thinking a little bit. If you see my podcast at all, that's one of my favorite things about it is it sparks a conversation. And if we can do that today and we can carry on that conversation, I think I've done my job and I'd be happy. So Joe had mentioned, born out in Presho, South Dakota. I can't claim to be a farmer. I don't have any good hunting spots for you. My brother Jason would be able to have that claim much more than I. My parents sold the farm when I was about 5 years old and was raised in Sioux Falls my entire life. Went to Christ the King for grade school, the old cathedral here for junior high, and then O'Gorman High School. Graduated in the class of 2000, or as we called it, the smoke-free class of 2000, and went on to USD for my undergrad business, and went to, Joe had mentioned this as well, St. Thomas Law School, and then right from there went to Notre Dame to do my MBA in finance and investments. Coming out of, God has worked in my life several different ways, not always obvious, but coming out of school, my intention was to be an investment banker, and specifically I wanted to be a distressed debt investment banker. I have always been attracted to situations that weren't optimized or worse, and trying to make those situations better. And but that was 2008, and if you all recall, there was plenty of distressed debt to be bought, just no one willing to buy it. And so I did have one job interview in 2008. The initial interview took place at 11 p.m. After the guy was leaving the gym, or leaving his office on the way to the gym. And I thought, I don't know that I want this life. So pivoted, and I did end up with 2 job offers. And this was one of the first ways I really felt God working in my life to kind of steer me in the right direction in a subtle way. One was a job offer to be a negotiator for a very large multinational corporation, which I thought sounded really cool. Get to use my law degree and my business degrees in a really unique way. And the second was to be an estate settlement specialist for a multinational bank, and settling high net worth dysfunctional family estates, which paid less and didn't seem to be all that appealing. However, one night as I was kind of considering the job offers, I went to bed and I had a dream. And in that dream, I remembered opening up my first bank account at the First National Bank in Sioux Falls, actually the Western Mall branch. I remembered how it looked, smells the same. And still had like the little doily things on the pens and everything. Like I just remember that, and I woke up and I was like, I guess I'm going to be in banking. So I worked for Wells Fargo for 18 months, and had a really incredible experience settling estates. My job was to handle highly dysfunctional families who had lost someone, and I would swoop in, clean it up, swoop out. Really, really entertaining work, great way to learn the business. Pivoted, worked for a couple other firms up in the cities. This was in Minneapolis. Worked for a couple other banks or financial firms in the cities for 5 or 6 years, until one day I got a call from a national headhunter asking if I had heard of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I was like, I think we both know the answer to that. And that was the end of 2015. 6 months later, I ended up getting the job here at First National Bank in Sioux Falls, which I still hold, which has been almost 8 years, which is kind of hard to believe. Time flies. Joe mentioned my friend Jen Reese is here. Jen likes to say the saying that I think is really apropos. I think God prepares us for moments in our life that we don't always know when they're going to happen or what they're going to look like. Jen, I'm going to butcher, for such a time as this, basically. And as I look back, I think about all the things God did in my life to prepare me for the role that I have today. The role that I took was to lead a really highly successful trust department here for the First National Bank in Sioux Falls. The role I got was to transform a highly successful trust department at the First National Bank in Sioux Falls. What I learned when I joined was that all the things we had done to make us really, really successful for many, many years really had to change in order for us to be a viable concern going forward. And so what that meant was I had to change everything. And I had to have a team around me that could help me change everything. And what came with that was a lot of fear, anxiety. If you've led before, you know leading can lead to kind of a professional loneliness at times. And sometimes you can be without peers. And I absolutely felt that as I went about my work. I like to say, but for Diane and God, I don't know that I would have made it through those period of times. Leadership is challenging, and when you have to change a lot and you have to move a culture, you know, there's a certain loneliness that goes with that, and you look out over a room of people who I don't know that they always necessarily love you, or they know that their lives are going to change and they're fearful, and that can be challenging. But for the grace of God, we did that, and I have an incredible team around me, and today we manage about $1.9 billion directly for clients and another $5.5 billion for clients in 48 states. We've got a team of 45 people. We really have 4 primary business lines, and we're growing exponentially, which is fantastic. My personal mission is, and this didn't really come into focus till a couple years ago, and when it did, everything else in my life professionally really clicked. My personal mission is to change the way wealth management services are delivered. And so what that means for me today is I spend a lot of my time focusing and obsessing, maybe Diane might say, obsessing, about the future of our business and aligning what we do today with where I think the business is going and what does that look like. And then I think, you know, Joe mentioned the podcast. I spend a lot of time doing marketing, which is not something I'm skilled at. I'm still not skilled at it, but I have good conversations with people. So, and the podcast is an interesting kind of segue, talking about faith and business and the intersection, because I started the podcast in January of 2020. When I did, if you looked at my original titles and idea episodes, they were incredibly boring and technical, and I thought, you know, I don't know that anybody would really want to listen to this. So I started doing a few episodes, and I just wasn't feeling it, and Diane actually challenged me, and she said, well, maybe if you loosened up a little bit, people might listen to it, and you might enjoy doing it. And I said, great suggestion. Why don't you come on the show and help? And so she and I, this is kind of a Holy Spirit moment, decided we were going to share our money story. And our money story, from just a really high level, the high notes, Diane came into our marriage with no debt. I came into the marriage with the opposite of no debt, which was a lot. I had about $220,000 in student loans. Turns out St. Thomas and Notre Dame, not cheap. But my parents swung for USD. So I brought all that into our marriage, and that created just a lot of feelings in me about guilt and all the sacrifice we had to make in order to get out from underneath that debt, because we just didn't want that in our lives. And so I just carried a lot of those feelings, and even when we got past the debt, those feelings never went away. And I thought, this is interesting. I wonder if other people experience this. And so she and I shared our story twice, actually. And the conversations that flowed from that was really a light bulb moment. So I started interviewing other couples, and it's kind of this How We Money series as part of the show. And one of the interesting things that happened was the number of couples that started bringing up faith. And I didn't ask them about it. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so we just talked about it. And then another couple talked about faith, and then another. And so then all of a sudden, this kind of created this other conversation. So now when couples come on, I don't know if it's self-selection or what it is, but a lot of couples will talk about faith. Jen and Mike were on the show, and that's a big theme for them as well. And so we have this kind of the intersection between faith and money and business and feelings and emotions, and it's become a really, really interesting thing that I'm really, really passionate about. So So as I think about my faith life, it is not really a very interesting story. I've never seen Jesus' face in a bowl of oatmeal. There's no drama. There's no conversion story. Like nothing. I didn't move away from the church at any given point. And I could probably count on one hand the weekends I've missed going to Mass. And doesn't make me a hero, but I was raised by a couple strong Catholics who believed very, very strongly in going to church and the ritual of the church and just showing up and doing the thing. And my dad was not an overt Catholic. He was probably more of a quiet Catholic. My mother is a Catholic mother. If you have one, you know what that means. And it's just going to church is what you did and being part of the faith. We prayed together. We started before we moved to Sioux Falls. We were at Christ the King Parish in Presho. Make it easy. We went to Christ the King Parish here in Sioux Falls. And at the time when we went to Christ the King, it was just this really incredible faith community. And a lot of kids went to O'Gorman, and so we had these solid, really, really solid families around us and solid friends. And I've got some friends here today, and one of the amazing things that we've shared is a shared faith. And when you have that level of deepness or engagement with your friends and your family and the other families around you, you can't help, I think, but be nurtured into the faith. And so I feel very, very blessed by that. And one of the biggest values, the things I think about the most is I'm so blessed that my parents valued a Catholic education. And that's one of the things that I'm probably most passionate about. Outside of work, I volunteer. I'm on the Avera Foundation. It's not called that, but Regional Council, I think it's called. Volunteers of America Foundation. But I'm most passionate about the work that I do on the O'Gorman Foundation and giving back and trying to help other kids experience a Catholic education that I had. The richness in that, and the fact that there's no holds barred. You can talk about things in a way you can't do in a public school setting today. So I feel very, very passionate about helping that community continue to thrive, and feel so blessed that my parents made that decision for me, because my brother Jason, he did not have that opportunity. There was no Catholic school system in Presho, barely a school system as I recall. So that's one of the greatest lifts in my life. So now, while I don't have any dramatic stories about faith, I do feel like I experience God in my life all the time. I experience Him in quiet moments, sitting in a quiet church or laying in bed early in the morning. I experience Him in meaningful conversations with friends, both old and new. In those conversations, I know God's there. I see God in the good moments of my life, but just because I'm wired, I really feel Him when I'm struggling. Like, I see Him and I recognize Him in the good times, but I can actually feel Him when times that I've struggled. I think God's an introvert like me. He's there, but He's not trying to make a scene. So He's just kind of always been there in my life. This is a work, it's a business fraternity here, so I know I experience God when I fulfill my responsibilities as a leader and as a father and as a husband. And I find God in the structure of our faith, which is why I love Catholicism so much. I think younger people today, and even a lot of people my age, have rebelled against the structure of the church, or they feel like it's too much or it's constrained or whatever. I feel the opposite. I find that there's great freedom in the structure of our faith, which is why I love it so much. I know I experienced God through my wife, Diane. God blessed me with a partner who is everything I'm not, most notably patient. And I experience Him in my work. And the places I feel Him the most are when I have a new idea or content creation. Coming up here, things to say, doing a podcast every month. I think a lot of people say they are waiting for inspiration to strike. My feeling is I'm waiting for the Holy Spirit to come help me out. And there are some things that I think about, and this is probably where I'll leave you and hope to get some conversation going. There are three things that I think about quite a bit, and I don't have any ideas, and I don't think any of us is going to solve them this morning. If you do have them solved, please call me. I'd love to hear about it so I stop thinking about them so much. But the first is this idea of happiness versus fulfillment. I think we live in a world today that is so insistent upon happiness and feeling, and it feels like we're always on a sugar high, looking for our next hit. Anyone who knows me well knows I'm not, by that standard, a happy person. I'm just not. But I am very deeply fulfilled, which is fine for me, but I often wonder, like, how does that show up? How does that show up in the workplace? How does it show up with my family, my friends? Do they think I'm just miserable, or would they look to me and say, well, he's really filled with the Holy Spirit. I want to be like him. I don't know that they would. And so I do think about that a lot. Like, how do I better project that feeling of fulfillment and why I'm fulfilled onto my family and friends in the community? I have a lot of work to do there. The second is how we should feel about success. I mean, I'm talking to a group of people who have all achieved some level and some incredible levels of success. And I think I can illustrate this best, the conflict I have with this, best with a story. So my father, who passed away 5-6 years ago, when I would tell him something that I had done in my life, a success I had, I got a good grade on a test, or I got a job, or whatever it is, he was always the most excited you could possibly be. And he would just be like, oh, Adam, like, that's incredible. Like, how do you, like, as a farmer, he just didn't get it. Like, how did you get good grades? Like, all these things that he was just outside of his life experience. And it was awesome. And I'd tell my mom the same story, and she'd say, you're very blessed. And I'd say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have even thought good thoughts. I don't know why I even said it. I'm sorry, forgive me. So my dad's gone, so I don't have that anymore. So I just have, I'm very blessed, which I am. But here's kind of where the conflict is. You know, this whole idea of being blessed and God working in our lives versus this idea of free will. God gives us free will to make choices we want to make. So in college, you know, my friends had free will to go out and have a couple 13, 14 beers before final the next day and didn't get a great grade. I dutifully studied and got a great grade. Should I feel bad about that? Like, how do you reconcile choices versus you're very blessed? And I think, you know, I talked to somebody about it yesterday, and they said, well, I think the Holy Spirit was working with you. Again, it was like, yeah, again, I'm sorry. I shouldn't even bring it up tomorrow. And so those are the things, you know, especially when you're in a leadership role or you're a producer, you know the sacrifice it takes to lead and to find a level of success. You know the sleepless nights, the gray hair, the missed vacations, the missed kids' activities. You know what it takes to become successful. It just doesn't happen. So then when success comes, how are you supposed to feel about that? I don't know the right answer. My mom knows, I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. The third thing I think about is this idea of the crosses each of us carry. I read a book once upon a time, I think it was called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. Didn't give me enough answers because I still think about it. I think, so one thing I know is that everyone struggles with something. Whether it's physical, it's mental, it's societal, it's families, whatever it is, everyone has a cross to carry. For me, I've always been an anxious person, been like that since high school. And for most of my life, my thought always was, why me? Like, why did I have to have this affliction? As I've gotten older, I've started to think, you know, why not me? While it's still not fun to deal with, I think a lot of high performers, and that's not, again, uncomfortable conversations, that's not a lot of things that high performers and successful people talk about, is the anxiety that comes with performing all the time. Diane and I always laugh and say the same thing that's made me successful professionally can be debilitating personally. So I think about crosses that we have to carry and why that is, and what is God. Is it a test? What is it? Why don't we talk about it? And I don't have the answer to that, but I know everyone struggles, and so how that shows up in the workplace is having more compassion and having an understanding, having conversations, be willing to lean into conversations with people and get to know them on a personal level, to know why they tick. So I think about that a lot. The last thing I'll leave you with, I know the theme, a lot of these conversations should be, how do we take Sunday into Monday? Let's just not be Catholics on Sunday. We need to do that all week. And some things that I have done, not all of them on purpose, some of them by accident, I think have helped me feel like I can be a Catholic all week and really wear that on my sleeve. The first is sometimes it happens by accident. And the case in point there is the podcast and people talking about faith to me on a show that's business related. And I know today a lot of people would try to separate those things. And I don't think we should do that. I think we are whole people, and that is part of who we are, whether you're Catholic, whether you're Christian, whether you're Jewish, whatever it is. That's something that's part of your identity. Being Catholic to me is no different than breathing. It's just part of who I am. And so I think it should be okay to talk about that. And so we do. I think you need to live your faith and follow the commandments. I don't think you should be a different person on Sunday than you are on Monday and Tuesday, and how you show up as a leader in particular. Would someone look to you and say, well, they're clearly Catholic, or they clearly believe in God? Do your actions match what it is you believe? The third thing is you should talk about it. That's kind of the podcast thing, but one thing I am very intentional about, when people ask you, hey, what are your weekend plans? I don't dismissively just like, not much, just going to hang out or whatever. I say, well, I got this and I got this, and then I'm going to church on Sunday. And so, I'm like, oh, well, what church do you go to? And and it just starts a conversation. Again, it's not confrontational. I'm not saying, have you been saved? It's I'm going to church, or I have to lecture this Sunday, or whatever it is. And it creates further on conversations. And an interesting thing about my group is we have a group of really strong Catholics. Don is part of my group, and we talk about Mass, and sometimes we'll go to Mass together on Ash Wednesday, or sneak over here to the cathedral and go to Mass. And so it's great to be able to have that as part of the business environment. And the last thing is, and I mentioned it earlier, just to have real conversations with people and be willing to lean in. I love a good, deep conversation. I don't want to work a room ever, so this is fun. But, I could sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with someone for 2 weeks and be totally content. So have good conversations and be willing to lean in. And if someone gives you a nugget, that's one thing I've learned on the podcast as well. If someone gives you a nugget, or I see it a lot with couples when I'm talking to them through work, and someone maybe will give a side eye or an eye roll or a wink to their spouse, and to be willing to say, what was that? I saw something there. Tell me more about that. Don't just pass over and go, the markets, huh? Yeah. Say, what is that? And I think it really can transform your relationships, and it can lead to deeper connections in the workplace and with clients and friends and family. So that is it for me. I put a lot of questions out there, not a lot of answers. So I am always willing to engage in these conversations. So I guess that would be what I would leave you with. If you haven't connected with me, please feel free to do so.